this is Mark A. Altman.
And this is DAREN DOCHTERMAN.
And this is Ashley Miller.
And we are the Inglorious
Treksperts. And today we commemorate the end of Frontier Day, the end of Picard.
Is it the final
3.
Frontier Day, you think?
I don't know, but this is a special episode for us, and so we had to bring in a really special guest, and to help us pay tribute to Picard season 3, we brought in a ringer. We brought in the great Steve ASBELL joining us again, president of 20th Century Studios and Star Trek fan extraordinaire. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you for having me. I wouldn't call myself as a ringer. You threw a ringer for a ringer. Sorry, I was trying to do my Walter. Couldn't rally fast enough. I did watch I went to see the Lebowski 25th anniversary this weekend, which was pretty awesome. Anyway, sorry.
Thorough.
Thank you for having me back on. It's such a pleasure to be here. A gentle reminder, I'm here as a fan. I have no professional connection to Star Trek, and so don't yell at me for anything.
Don't send you strongly worded postcards about.
I'm just here as a fan, and I know that this is. I think the Mark's tenure on the show is dwindling. I mean, he's coming to the end of this season, and possibly your
life.
No, not your life. Your life.
Well, when you say it like that, Steve.
No, I'm trying to prepare myself for a markless Treksperts.
I got to tell you, shields are down, deflectors are weakening. I was adamant that at the end of the 5th season, I was done with the show. Not out of any animus. I love the show. I love my co-hosts, our guests, but I just felt like I had nothing left to say about Star Trek, and maybe someone else who had more to say could join us. Now, in a way, much like Kirk's faith was restored at Genesis and his son's faith, season 3 of Picard is the first time in a long time that I got excited about Star Trek again. And suddenly there was like something new to talk about, as we are going to tonight. And so I thought to myself, well, if Star Trek can be good again, if they're actually doing new Star Trek that I haven't seen, and we're not talking about Star Trek 3 for the 400th time, then maybe I should stick around. Now, I haven't decided yet, but I am doing the math on that. So it's possible I may consider staying, but then again, I don't know, because Star Trek Picard season 3, I hate to call it season 3 because it means there was a season 1 and 2, which were both not good. But
didn't exist.
But Star Trek season 3 is so good that kind of makes me want to stick around and talk about Star Trek a little more. So I don't know
how your co-hosts feel about being held in suspense.
Oh, we're making a list for auditions, man. So if you've got a rep who wants to call us about auditioning for Mark's job,
I heard Josh Gad was a fan.
I mean, I think they would drop me in a heartbeat for Josh Gad. I mean, Josh Gad could come in. Ben Stiller. There are plenty of people who are.
Just know if we take a glance at your chair and you're not in it, then you're probably down in the engine room mixing matter and antimatter with your hands. So just be warned for that scenario.
More likely chocolate chip cookie dough, but okay.
Big gloopy mess.
Yeah, it's like, okay, wait, I thought this was the...
He's mixing pasta and antipasta.
If the chair is empty, I know I don't have a partner.
That's right.
If the chair is full, I know I have a partner.
I know I don't.
Yeah. Because this is the life fandom we've chosen.
You got to get it.
Yeah. I know.
Sorry.
I know. We should record
2 different movies in the course of the Star Trek podcast.
Well, we're desperately trying to avoid spoilers, aren't we?
Right. I believe in America. America has made my fortune.
Here's the thing, audience. If you have not watched the final episode of Picard season 3, The Last Generation, and you don't want to be spoiled, you should probably not listen.
Stop now.
You should stop.
Go no further.
Stop in the name of love, because we are going to be talking. This is spoiler central now. We've been very good about not talking about any spoilers. We've had guests from the show on, we've had Rob Burnett on, and somehow nobody's given away any spoilers. Today, it's all about the spoilers because it's come to an end. Unfortunately, it's over.
We're going to be speaking very frankly about it, probably more frankly than you've ever been spoken to.
A man
Surely.
in that position has ever been spoken. Darren, you can have my answer now if you want.
We're going to be talking about International Immobiliare. We're going to be talking about all kinds of. I hate calling it season 3, but I keep saying season 3 because it's very important to differentiate what season 3 is from season 1 and 2. And it's funny because in a way, this definitely isn't, Steve, right? Season 8 of Star Trek. It's more of a sequel to Nemesis than season 8, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, mainly because it has all of them back, but also I think addresses so many of the things that we wanted to know about, about all these characters after that final movie, which was, I actually just started rewatching it because I got my 4K set came in this weekend or last week, and I was like, man, I know we were talking about doing a conversation about that film, and I'm always in the maybe it's not as bad as it's actually moments where I'm like, it's not as bad as I thought, but then there are moments where it is, and it ultimately was such a disappointing conclusion for them because it wasn't really a conclusion.
It wasn't a conclusion. It was just another.
But it also
sort of an ending.
What's that?
It was just sort of an ending.
It was sort of an ending, and dealt with Data, I guess, in that sense. But nothing that left you feeling like I feel in a way that All Good Things did. Let's just say at the end of Next Generation, where you
it's
if it had never happened, if no movies had happened after All Good Things, it would have stood the test of time.
But it's always a good practice to back up your data.
Well, Ashley, I got to ask you this because I think the big difference between, in a way, from Nemesis and what we've seen now with Picard is with Nemesis, you really see after Insurrection, the power of the two stars emerge, Patrick and Brent, and they really controlled what they wanted to do, what they thought Star Trek was. They brought in John Logan, and it becomes the Picard data show to the. And you see that in the first 2 seasons of Picard, the way they got Patrick, besides a very large check, was for him to be more creatively involved. I wanted to deal with my mother and an abusive father and all this stuff that was true of Patrick and not true of Picard. What I think is so liberating, and you tell me if you agree, Ashley, about season 3, is this came from Terry. Who pitched this, and if anything, Patrick was kind of reluctant to get the band back together, and then ultimately he's kind of won over. And I think there was a little guilt there that he had excluded them from this, and then he was also won over by sort of the approach, which still was dealing with a more complex character, perhaps, than 90s Next Gen.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, completely. I mean, first of all, when you kind of lay it out that way, all I can think of is, so Patrick Stewart is David Lee Roth.
Well, that makes Kate Mulgrew Sammy Hagar.
That's weird. But she can't drive 55, which is why Voyager took 7 years to get back to the Alpha Quadrant. But I digress. Later, I'll tell you about my experience at a Van Halen concert. But anyway, look, I think that the show benefits greatly from the fact that it, unlike the movies, doesn't feel the need to focus on Patrick and Brent, who, look, for very good reasons, I think, in the context of the films, became the focus. Because in many ways, to the fans, other than Worf, they were kind of the focus of the show. And Worf got to have his day in the sun on Deep Space Nine, so that was fun and fine. But what has been, to me, revelatory about Picard is not only do I feel like these characters legitimately aged, right? Like, and not just physically, but their lives. They moved on in ways, frankly, that even the original series characters did not, who were a little bit frozen in amber, just getting older inside the amber. Now, some of their perspectives changed, their points of view changed, but for the Next Generation cast, their lives changed. Picard's life obviously did. Crusher's obviously did. There's that terrific scene in episode 3 where they're just talking about the choices that Beverly made and why. That feels like an honest conversation that people would have. Riker's whole story is just it's just emotionally harrowing. And there's no precedent for that in Star Trek. And I think that, you know, that's kind of true of all those characters. Geordi comes into this show not just with a different job, but with a point of view that has been reshaped by the fact that he's become a father. Mm-hmm. And his idea of what his family is now very different, and it's very honest, and it feels right. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, it would have been I think that it would have been sad if this whole season had just been it's the Patrick and Brent show again for 10 episodes.
Yeah, you look circumspect. Go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to say one thing about the scene you just talked about, which was really where I was hooked from the first episode, but that scene really, I think we might talk about this last time, got me like really into it, in the sense that it was not just a great, well-written scene of characters that we love and we got to see them together, interact together for the first time in a long time, but it was also such a well-executed version of a very difficult idea, which is, oh, this happened, the sort of retconning of like, okay, she didn't tell you, she got pregnant at the end of Nemesis, and then 20 years went by and nobody talked to anybody, and you have to kind of go back and explain in a credible way why these choices were made, because they don't make sense in a vacuum, or they don't make sense outside of the start. You just know, okay, the story needs it to be, because otherwise he would have mentioned that he had a son before. But the fact that that Terry and his team landed that in a way where not only did I believe it, but I was moved. I really, that was a big moment in the series for me.
Well, Darren, I think what's so interesting is if you looked at a press release that was just describing the show on paper, and it said, the crew of the Enterprise D returns. Captain Picard now has a son. He hasn't talked to Beverly in 20 years. And everyone's gone their separate ways, right? The TV Guide logline, it would sound either like a really bad Star Trek II ripoff or just not very good. And yet there's a phrase in this business, execution dependent, right?
Yeah. And
this is executed with such finesse that it's so much more than the sum of its parts, isn't it?
I think that's absolutely true, because as you stated, a lot of these story elements and tropes are things that fans have thought about over the past 35 years.
They have shipped.
Yeah. And the thing is,
in 1993.
The thing is, I think that the mixture of all of these things and the growth of the actors involved has really brought it along. Today I watched Encounter at Farpoint again, all the way through.
I'm sorry.
No, you know what? It is what it is. It's a kind of clunky balancing act, trying to develop something completely new without going into the past, and trying to forge new avenues.
LaForge.
I knew
and it doesn't.
Was going to say it. I had a bet in my mind of which one of you, and I lost it.
And it doesn't quite make it. It doesn't stick the landing. But it does have the germ of good ideas in it. And I think the main thing that stood out to me in season 3 of Picard is the relationship between Picard and Riker. That Picard needs Riker almost as much as Kirk needs Spock. The humor that Frakes brings to it is essential to make it not seem as heavy and turgid and really difficult to watch as the previous 2 seasons. Picard needs that, and Frakes brings it every episode. He's so good, and he brings sort of the swashbuckler to it.
I would argue
it's
that
essential.
Not only is that you're 100%, 1000%, whatever percent, right? But I would even say that it's something they didn't do even in the show. Or
Absolutely.
In a way that was so welcome. I mean, to your point, Ash, about, that the duo became Picard and Data, and yet because in some ways they never quite, I mean, they were good, and Riker was always great, and Picard was always great, and Patrick and Jonathan were excellent in their parts, but it never quite gelled into the sort of, Captain Number One. I mean, I don't say it didn't. There were obviously moments where it was great, but what you're describing was so the Butch and Sundance thing that Terry always talks about, where it's an inverted thing, where Riker
and
is the one he needs.
It only works with their characters in this later developed stage as equals. And it is so refreshing to see that. And it's something, look, in the show, Picard never really liked Data. That's the truth of the whole thing. He thought he was a good officer, but he wasn't pals with him.
Right. Geordi was pals with him.
Geordi was pals with him. But the thing is that, I'm never going to stop, tooting the horn of the greatness that is Jonathan Frakes in this, because he really brings that fun back and makes it seem like a real relationship.
Well, Ashley, you were talking about in Nemesis that it was really about Picard and Data, and for a long time throughout the series, they was trying to figure out who their Kirk, Spock, and McCoy was, and for a while it was Picard, Data, and maybe it was Worf, or maybe it was Riker, or maybe it was someone else. They never could figure it out. And what was so cagey, I think what was so smart, tell me if you agree about this, Ashley, by introducing the characters in drips and drabs rather than saying we're all back together. We're able to explore them, and Riker finally gets his chance on the stage, because he was great in episodes like Frame of Mind, and he was great in episodes like First Contact, but he was always overshadowed by the Data episode, or our guest star, or Patrick, or this is going to be about Worf, or this is going to be about Steela, or whatever, and finally, by saying, okay, we're going to focus on Riker, and those first couple episodes are very Riker centric. You're right. The Butch, Cassie, and the Sundance Kid aspect, where they have this great relationship and they're equals. He's no longer a subordinate. He's been captain of his own ship. So now he's on par with Picard. And it's different the way you treat your boss as opposed to you treat your peer, right?
Also,
and now suddenly
your
Picard's
friend.
a peer.
And also I would say Riker having had and lost children, where Picard's just dealing with finding one for the first time,
which is my favorite thing. That
Riker's past him. It's he needs. Sorry.
That's right. It's just that Frakes is bringing this thing throughout. Number one, you're totally right, Mark, that the way that the characters were introduced, it wasn't just a matter of, well, you have to have something for them to do. It was also
it's the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, right. The show created a context for bringing everybody in and why they became important, and what that relationship was going to be. But to go back and again toot the Frakes horn, which is a trombone.
That's right.
By the way, it's he manages something very difficult, and I think in some ways he maybe has the toughest job on the show, because he demonstrates this absolute delight at meeting Jack Crusher. Okay, are you not seeing what I'm seeing?
Right. Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, the walking back, and he is just he's wonderful, and he's light, and all these other things, and then he can turn around and he can do that scene where he is trying to send a message to Deanna, or he can talk about what it was like to go to his kid's funeral, which is just,
or you can say, you just killed us all.
Exactly. When he's standing up to him and having that conflict with him, and you believe both of them.
The Crimson Tide scene.
The Crimson Tide scene.
Never, to all of your points, that never happened on the show. That's so interesting when you.
Well, I want to ask you about that, but first, I just want to say this. I you both mentioned how much you like the idea that they've lost a son. Now, I have to say, as far as I was concerned, this would have been a better show if season 1 and 2 weren't canon. Other than that, like, I didn't need to see Rafi. I didn't need to hear about how Picard was Mr. Roboto now because he was in a robot body. All that nonsense that they did in season 1 and 2. All this stuff with Brent that I still don't know what it was all about. But the fact that, and even at the time, in the one half decent episode, Nepenthe, even in that, I didn't like the fact that they had lost a kid. Here, it pays off. Here it works.
You don't even need to have
don't even need
seen
to have
that
seen
shit
it.
for it
Just
to
backstory.
work.
Thankfully.
It's just perfect and wonderful, like as it is. It becomes revelatory, and it
all of
deepens
his conversations with and get the message, and then when you finally see them together in the jail cell, in the holding cell, and he comes clean about him having been stuck. I mean, it's great. And this experience, the near-death experience, and the nebula and the vortex and being pulled in and getting out and the birth of the new thing was really special. And it's like, it's so interesting and well done how you don't need to have experienced that one episode in the previous season. It was
I want to ask you, because that scene you point is such a great scene, that scene in the prison cell between him and Troy, maybe one of the great Star Trek scenes.
Yeah,
certainly one of the great Next Generation.
And they're
scenes,
both
right?
funny.
And then it pays off with a joke, right? That's what's so great, because it deals with some real human emotions that we can all relate to. It's very smart and well written, and then it's super funny. That line where he's giving a Worf shit for flirting with Troy because they used to, it's this gentle poking at these things that the show has done wrong in the past, like making fun of the Worf Troy arc, making fun of the fact that in the first season they lived in a cabin in the woods making pizza, right? I mean, it has so.
I want to go back to the city.
Yeah, they made a meal of that. They made it feel right. And you know, the other thing that's happening in those scenes, and it's also true of the Picard Crusher scene. They managed to do two things. Number one, they get around the Roddenberry rule in a really brilliant way. Because they introduce conflict that feels organic to who they are. The other thing they do is, and this is where I think like the writing in those scenes and just in general was kind of transcendent. It leaned into the sci-fi. It leaned into the space opera elements and used that as ammunition for emotion, right? So when Riker and Deanna are having that discussion about what's happened with their relationship and with Thad, it's not just, well, and then I was really sad because my kid was dead and you couldn't understand that I was sad. It's like, no, the problem is, lady, you loved me so much. You tried to make it okay for me and pull it away from me. And you did that, and it fucked me up. And I had to get away, not because I couldn't deal with like what happened with Thad, but because I needed to deal with it.
And the corollary to that is the Beverly scene, like you just said, where she's like, she talks about Wesley's, traveler existence as, which is obviously a big sort of thing in the show. And she's like, I lost a son to the stars. Like the reality of that, when she said it that way in the scene, in the context of her life, not just the whole, everybody, if his name is Picard, he's always going to be hunted. Like, yeah, you're always going to have that. And they do, I don't mean to say it like that. I just mean like, that is the obvious or the expected note to hit, which is, I knew that because like first it's, well, you were busy, and then I realized it was gonna be bad, and then she reveals that it's like I lost a son to the star, like I will never see him again, and I'm not doing that.
And that's what's so crazy and clueless
made it land for me
about some of these fans who are like, oh, they missed the boat by not having Wesley in it. Wrong. First of all, who cares, right? Who cares? We don't need to see him again. He left the show. Same people say, "Oh, we didn't see Denise Crosby." Who the fuck cares? She left the show, right? So, but with Will, it was kind of like, this is what's so interesting. She's upset. She's so worried about losing another, but she lost him to the stars when he decided to go off and be a traveler.
Sci-fi, to Ash's point, like, oh yeah, it was a story, Ellen, but it was like to the craziest science fiction idea. It's like he's a god somewhere now. Like he's doing his thing. He's never coming back.
And so much more interesting than having him pop in and say, I'm back. Yeah. And it was the same thing with Denise. They used the character, in much the same way it was used in Measure of Man, admittedly, but they used the character of Tasha Yar in a way that means something, rather than bringing back Sayla, that stupid contrived nonsense from Next Generation, where she's her own freaking daughter. It's so much better that way, where it services character and story and this really sort of deep, complex story they're telling, rather than a bunch of sci-fi nonsense.
And it lets the characters behave like real people and have real responses to real problems, not like bringing Spock back in Star Trek 3.
Oh boy.
Oh, here we go again. Oh man, he just reaching for that one.
Now Mark's definitely not coming back.
But I want to preface by and then about this Roddenberry's box. I don't want to lose this thread, because Roddenberry's box, a lot of people say, "Oh, we could have told these stories in the 90s." Well, that's not exactly true, is it? This was a Roddenberry creation, and a rule that was enforced later by Rick Berman and Michael Piller and Brannon, who all subscribed to the fact that there is no conflict in the 23rd century. We're elevated people. We have overcome our petty jealousies and difficulties, and so conflict comes from the outside, not between our characters, right? And it does seem that, if anything, this season, or this Picard season 3, has jettisoned the idea of Roddenberry's box and really went headfirst into interpersonal conflict. In retrospect, do you feel like, where was this show? Wouldn't it have been nice if Roddenberry's box didn't exist back in the day?
It's like, honestly, it's what if the Next Generation was written like Deep Space Nine? Because it's exactly that kind of philosophy and approach that made Deep Space Nine different and special. And it's especially like, as that show went along and Ira kind of became more and more in charge of it. And now we're seeing it here with these wonderful actors as well.
But Darren's not a Deep Space Nine fan, so I wonder what he thinks.
Well, it's not that I'm not a fan. It's just that I never got into it. But
that's not a fan.
I think that Roddenberry's box was a huge detriment, and I think it came from a wrong place. I think Roddenberry began to believe his own BS from his lectures and all that stuff, and everyone, lauding his future human aspect of Star Trek. And I don't think that works at all for telling actual stories about real people. That's the problem.
I'm a little between you guys, I think, because I feel like it was useful, certainly as a distinctive element of what Star Trek was, as part of the DNA from the original show of defining, of having rules, having a sort of point of view, and trying to stick to it. And I think that it informed, if not the best, it didn't create the best opportunities for the widest range of storytelling. It was unique. That said, it did not age as well with the rest of storytelling, and not to say that stories got better. There's plenty of excellent science fiction, literature, always.
But the offshoot from that was that the only time we ever got interesting stories on Next Gen is when they brought in outer characters to stir things up.
Sure.
And that just made our own crew less than human.
But can I ask you guys a question about that then? And this is, I think, outside of my
box,
outside of my understanding. What is this
ASBELL
connection to the syndicated element of storytelling, where you had to have characters in episodic format that didn't change too much, that couldn't kind of get too dramatic, if you will, because you had to kind of keep them going more or less on the rails for however many 22 episodes.
That had nothing to do with Roddenberry's box.
There's a difference between that and they can't have conflict. Like here, okay, I'll give you an example and this is riffing a little bit, but hey, it's my job, it's what I do. So if I were somebody who were advocating the Roddenberry box and you presented the Riker Troy scene from episode 8 to me, here's how I would criticize it. I would say, well, Deanna Troi is a Starfleet officer and a professional counselor, and she's Betazoid. So she would never have done the
Half
thing
beta
that
sub.
Riker said she did, because, or half, whatever. She would never have done the things that Riker said she did, because she would have known that that would have been exactly the wrong way to help him. That really she wouldn't have used her powers in that way, because using her powers in that way means that she didn't understand and that she was being selfish. And in the 24th freaking century, like, she wouldn't be selfish like that. So none of those things would happen.
Well,
Like,
remember, even in
that
the
would be
bonding,
Roddenberry box.
even in the bonding, when Ron Moore sold that wonderful script about an officer, you know, kid who has to deal with the death of his mother on an away team, Roddenberry was like, "Oh no, he wouldn't have to mourn, because in the future, we understand death is just something that happens, and he would not be upset about it." Right? That I mean, that was Roddenberry's box taken to the extreme, and of course, they found a very clever and smart way to do it, where Worf sort of becomes the surrogate father and has to teach him how to accept what's happened. But it is exactly what Ashley said, you know, and I think what I think we have embraced about this season of Picard, this Terry season, is that it takes the best of the original and the best of Next Gen.
Yep.
And Next Gen never had that humor, that glint in the eye that the original had.
Yep.
And maybe it had at times, like with Best of Both Worlds. And that's why, surprise, surprise, they keep coming back to Best of Both Worlds, whether it's First Contact or Picard, right? We keep coming back the same way that everything came back to Khan over and over. Not literally Khan, but knocking off Khan, or finding a villain like Khan. With Next Generation, it's always, let's do Best of Both Worlds, the Borg, you know, and I do think that Ashley is 100% right, that you could not have done this, not because you couldn't do this in the 90s, but because they wouldn't do it in the 90s.
Right. Should we talk about some of the other characters, some of the new?
Well, I want to. I'm glad you brought that up, because we talked about how much we love what they did with these characters, right? And before we go to the new characters, I want to talk to what they did, I think, which was really special, which is Michelle Forbes and Ensign Rowe.
Yeah. Imposters, oh my god, is one of the it's I just rewatched it like a couple nights ago, and it is one of my favorite, I think it's one of my favorite Trek episodes of all time. And just the scenes between them, like look, it's just like an incredibly well executed show episode on its own merits. But wow, you know, talk about, like, there's emotional gut punch after emotional gut punch as these two characters work out their history.
And they both had a strong point of view, and neither was wrong and neither was right.
Yep. And then that ending, just like in the best way.
And here's another thing that's crazy. And again, I don't want to say, oh, but on the web they're saying, because who cares? But on the web they're saying,
we care.
Oh, they shouldn't have killed her, right?
Show.
They should have killed her, as though this show is going to be on the air for another 20 years. This is probably it. I hate to say. So what a great way to end that character.
Any characters that we loved are brought in, dealt with, and killed.
Roe, to make that sacrifice, to have gone through what she goes through, and she comes in and have them completely at odds. And then by the end, it's like this platonic love story between these two. And you hurt me so much, and I hurt you, and you know, but we can get past it. And then she sacrifices her life.
She goes out like a boss.
Yeah. Oh my God, how great is that, Steve?
It's great. I was surprised. I was thrilled. I was surprised in the sense that I didn't think of all the I mean, it makes sense, you know, of all the characters or the threads from, you know, that you could go back to in all of those years of Next Generation, that character, you know, because that's a lot of real estate for a, you know, 10 episode show. And I know Terry said, I think he only had Michelle for like a day or something, or very short.
It wasn't very short, but she was shooting another show.
Yeah,
what I would love to see is the Paramount Plus streaming numbers for Preemptive Strike. I would like to know how many people went and watched that show from the 70s, which no one has ever talked about since it probably aired. It's not a bad episode, you know, but it's a good episode. But I don't think it's ever been in the zeitgeist or among Star Trek fans ever talk about it, ever think about it.
Because there's a whole, it's one thing to say, okay, you know, we brought back Moriarty, you know, as for a minute, and that's fun to see because that's a deep cut for fans. So when you're making sort of return show, but with the Next Generation cast, which was very popular. Meaning there was a part of the return. I'm sure one of the reasons it's not surprising the show's done so well is that there's a lot of love in the mainstream audience for that cast and for that show.
The funny
So
thing.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say with Roe, I'm like, because that is because I started thinking, well, was there something that other like I don't even mean Q, but like something that would have been, someone's gonna recognize this. I love that it was not like it was like nobody knows other than us and the people that watch the show who that is, and yet. And I, brought back in that moment, like when because it wasn't in the movies, like that's another thing. It's something that hadn't been interrogated in the films, and so it was ripe to be returned to. But that scene, again, it goes back to this what we're talking about, which is it could have gone either way had that scene in the bar not been there or not been as well executed as it was. Where like if it was just them going at each other on the, like I'm mad at you, and and she's pretending not to care, but they get into it in the holodeck, and it was great. You just caught up in it, and that's what sold me.
And Steve, before we get to the characters, you just brought up something, them meeting on the holodeck, and this it turned into Cheers in the show, right? They're constantly in the holodeck. They're in this 10 forward that was created for the this new series, which is a kind of contrived thing. What was so amazing, and I've read criticism of it, like, oh well, the whole thing about it having its own power source is, who cares? It's there for story. I don't care about how they justify it, that line about it has its own power, or the fact that it's the wrong 10 forward, then Picard would have no connection to this. It would be the 10 forward on the D. Okay, none of that matters, because of course they had to use the set that they built for season 2 to amortize their cost. You know what? Fine.
It's great producing.
It's great producing. And that's what's so brilliant about the show. From our perspective as people who all work in the business, this show, Terry was so savvy, because you got to remember, they hadn't broken the show when he had to sit down at the beginning of season 2 and say, these are the sets we need to build. Yeah. They hadn't done a room. They didn't know what they needed. He just said, I'm going to need this, and this could work in season 2 and it could work in season 3. It was the only way to do it, because let's face it, that cast was freaking expensive, and they had him over a barrel. You couldn't suddenly say, we can't afford LeVar, we can't afford Michael. You had to have everybody. So, the fact that it's basically up until 9 and 10, a glorified bottle show, is amazing that they pulled it off. And those sets are so great with Dave Blass and his team, at which one point included DAREN DOCHTERMAN, is sensational and so smart.
I just want to talk
DAREN,
a little bit
about.
Pardon?
Sorry, I was going to say you mentioned you and the production design, but you talk about what
I only worked a couple weeks on season 3. I did some things, and fortunately or unfortunately, I had to go off and do motion picture 4K, which is fine by me. But but I had to slog through working on seasons 1 and 2, so that was my burden. But it's all fine. I'm glad to have been able to participate in it. But the thing is, I just want to talk about this perspective of what is fan service, and when is it bad and when is it good. I think fan service is a negative connotation, because it's something like, we'll just throw these little morsels out to the fans and they'll eat it up and they'll love it. That's not what this is. This is not fan service. This is giving reassurance that they actually had seen the previous shows and actually understood the previous shows. It's reassurance to the fans that they're not going to lead you astray, that they know where you've been in your journey. That's a different thing. That's not just looking up in the encyclopedia things that happened and plopping them into the script and saying, hey, look at us.
It's not like saying we don't have Darth Vader, let's bring back the Emperor. Right. For no reason other than he's a popular, iconic character. Right. Instead, it's about saying it enriches the story. It enriches the characters, because we know what this all means. And then to add on top of that, Stephen Barton, and Freddie Weidman's sensational score, which not only works great as score, but obviously honors this incredible legacy of Star Trek music. And it really is the first time, other than the movies, since the original, that you have this kind, and maybe some of Ron Jones's music in Next Gen, where you have this kind of sensational music written for the show.
Like every time you see the Shrike, you get that funky bass line.
Yeah,
that every Trek fan knows.
But it's like I think you're making it's a good point to stop on in terms of because everything is I don't say weaponized now, but that notion of there's so much conversation about nostalgia. What does it mean? How much of it is cynical, mining things, but it's the difference of someone like you said. I think you said it best that you can tell it's hard enough to make anything work great and make a story work well and bring characters back in a way that you've got to have them change, but to have things in there that are, I even hate the term Easter eggs. I hate because it itself makes it into something. Rewarding you for recognizing something is separate from the enjoyment of the piece. When I see Captain Rachel Garrett, the Red Lady, I'm like, that's cool. It doesn't take me out of it. I'm like, oh, this is a world that the fabric of this world is continuous and vast.
Canon enriches it.
Yeah,
it enriches it because it means that all that stuff happened.
It means that the creators have gone on this journey the same as you have.
Right, but they're not making it like I don't say throwing it in your face. Again, it's how it's done, but it's less about how many things are packed in there or how it's about. Does it enhance your sense of time? And
does it resonate?
And they exist inside their own context so that you can, if you don't know what they are, you are not sitting there wondering what the hell that is or why that's important. It is self-evident.
Let's just get it out of the way. Having a fleet museum is a really interesting way to get this. It's a part of the story. It's a big story point through a couple different times. But it's like, yes, you have a moment where all these ships are in the Fleet Museum and Geordi runs it. Like, okay, that's a choice. And it works because it's not like saying, I don't know what the alternative would have been about how to get all those. It's not like
saying Worf is running the Fleet Museum.
Yeah, but what I would say? I just want to say one thing. I don't think the Fleet Museum, and I loved it. I don't think that's an inspired idea. Ron and Brannon had it when they were doing all good things.
It's an old idea.
It's an old idea. It's great. It accomplished exactly what it needed to do. It was perfect. But to me, along the lines of what you're saying, what's so great is that scene where Patrick is sitting eating dinner alone, and the cadets come over and said, "Oh, we have these questions about these missions you went on, and tell us about it." And then he starts telling us, and in those stories are episodes we knew, and then he wanted me to tell I had to communicate through metaphor, right? That is so great. And then, as good as that is, you have the payoff when you reveal, and it's brilliantly shot. Ed Spieler is sitting there. Have you ever wanted your own family? Yeah. Starfleet is the only family I ever needed. That hurts more than any phaser shot. Mm-hmm. That hurts more than any transporter accident. What we got back didn't live long, man. He eviscerates him right there, not knowing the damage that he's done.
That's the real killer.
That was kind of the thing that was very consistent throughout the season. Again, like all of these things, like these member berries, the Easter eggs, the fan service, whatever you want to call it, it all provided emotional ammunition for scenes. So the bad version of the Fleet Museum is you go like, well, there's Kirk's Enterprise, and there's this, and there's that, and that's fun. But instead, what you get is, well, there's the Voyager, right? And look, I didn't really even like that show, but I suddenly found myself getting fucking nostalgic for Voyager. Why? Because
the character
cared.
Yeah, exactly.
And you believed it, like in her own context, that she was telling you a story about her life that you cared about because we cared about her. And then to just go for like the deep cuts that were just fun and not just, well, there's the bird of prey. No, really. Like there's like Kirk's bird of prey. It has an answer to our problem, a very Kirkian answer to our problem. And it's so fucking clever. They named the episode after it. And also, by the way, that was a whole double entendre. But that was the they there was, I think I can't even think of an example where they gave us something that was a callback that just existed for its own sake, and if you didn't understand it, well, then you were just lost.
Well, and
Well, there
Steve,
were a couple
I-
for Attack
the
Triple.
Genesis device. The Genesis
yeah,
device.
I mean, I would say there were some sort of that were in Daystrom that I think were probably for the punters. I mean,
Yeah,
in
but
the way
that was
like-
background. That was background stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it in a negative context. I just
Right.
mean that there were something that even the most casual of Star Trek fan of a certain age would certainly, anybody that knew, you saw Kirk's body. I mean, like, there was, that was the place to sort of,
And God bless them for throwing that out. Just saying, okay, they got Kirk's body. In our headcanon, maybe he's cloned, maybe he could still come back. It's never going to happen. But
saucer section off of Viridian 3, they could certainly get him.
They get his saucer section off of
Yeah.
3.
So my question to you now, Steve, because you mentioned this earlier, is all these wonderful characters. And before we talk about the new characters, there was one character who is in a way new to us, because I think it's safe to say none of us were huge Voyager fans.
Yeah.
And I know that 7 of 9 is extremely popular character. She ranked high on our list of 101 Greatest Star, but not, a top 10. But oh my God, what this show does for that character. I mean, she's now, I have to say, one of my favorite characters. I love the story, the 7 story in this.
Yes,
I agree. I think it's excellent. I similarly was not a huge fan. I mean, knew her, always admired her work, liked her in the show, but I think it goes to also why we love sort of Starfleet based shows so much of people in uniform, because they create circumstances for characters. I mean, because of her relationship with Shaw and seeing her struggle with being in Starfleet, even if you didn't know Rangers and what she was doing, and you obviously you knew kind of that she was Borg, and that she had a connection with her Voyager family and Janeway and Tuvok, but sort of her in this second in command position under a guy who she doesn't respect, at least in the when we meet him, is such a great, it's a classic, I mean, it's a trope in a good way, I suppose, but it's like that idea of the hierarchy of a crew on a ship gives you this framework to take those characters. And like I said, she wasn't until, I mean, she was on Voyager, I guess, but that was so long ago, gives you instantly a context for the two of them, which was lovely.
There's one thing about it that I find a little odd, and there's a big surge of reactions from certain aspects of the community about it, and this is the thing of dead naming, her referring to herself as 7 of 9, and the captain wanting her to refer to her old name, Annika. And I think that the way it's written in the series is wrong, and it doesn't feel right. It's that she prefers the name given to her by her captors, basically her kidnappers, and it feels not right to me. That the release of her humanity would have her calling herself Annika again, and it's just very odd, because it seems false to me. And
but I think she reclaimed that whole
debated.
7 thing all those years on Voyager, where she had this new surrogate family and she was 7 to them, so that meant something to her, and that her Borg identity was part of her. So I could see why that Borg name means something.
That's a good title, the Borg identity.
That she had
the Borg identity.
The Borg identity. Wow.
The Borg supremacy.
Oh my God, wait a minute.
We've got something here.
Hold on, pause. We gotta
Coming soon.
Not knowing or recalling the specifics of how Voyager ended in that respect, but I read it as that was her way of honoring the sort of synthesis of her life, of not that you can't bury the trauma of Borg, and that actually is, when she woke up, that's who she was. And it fit perfectly because it naturally fit, because he wouldn't call her that because of his own
No, I understand, and it works within the show.
I understand that
It's
he's
a
not
fair
saying he
question.
doesn't like what the show did. He just thinks, why would she want to be called Seven?
Yeah.
Given that she was a Borg
Right.
and it was such a horrible. It's like Picard going around, "Hello, I'm Locutus."
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
don't call me Jean-Luc anymore. But I understand what Darren's saying. I disagree, but I understand the point.
That's fine.
But she's excellent, and definitely it makes you care about a dynamic, and then I think we should talk about Todd and
Wow, Todd, what a
Yeah.
revelation Todd
because
Stashwick
when you
is.
have that, I mean, we're talking about like it's like such an like you could have had just a show with all the things we've just talked about with Frakes and everybody, doing their best, doing this great work, and had a show of like other good people in it, and
Yeah.
then you have this character who just kind of comes out of nowhere, has no antecedent in the shows, doesn't appear in any of the shows, doesn't, there isn't specifically his style of captain, and yet fits so well with, we've talked about it, various times, like what does it mean to be in Starfleet, even if you're a different character,
Even if you're a dipshit from Chicago.
Yeah, even if you're a dipshit from Chicago. But that and such a fantastic, I thought, I mean, his performance, but also just how well substantiated his character was. Not even before you get to his Shaw, his Robert Shaw Quint speech, and you find out where it all comes from, which is, it's not totally surprising in a way, but it's done so well.
Yeah.
But the idea that he was an engineer, like that those people become, get the command track too, that he had this sort of fanship of Geordi, which was fun. And it sort of allowed him to, that's I guess what I'm getting at. It was substantiated that he was different from the captains we know on the shows, but neither was he Styles or
Esteban.
any of the Esteban or the dipshits that we don't like.
Right.
From the
And there's
past.
so many of those characters.
There's so many
that we don't like, that are just there to make our characters look smart because they're so stupid.
Right.
Exactly.
And the great thing is we don't like him at the beginning, and it's completely valid.
But we
I
like
like
him for
But-
being as funny
But
and
as
charming as he is. Sorry,
as he goes along, the great thing is that we figure out that he's not wrong. His position is not wrong.
right.
He's
And
pretty
that's
right.
That's what helps us open our minds a little bit about.
We don't like him for all the right reasons.
Right,
Even when
because
he
he's
says
a
that
dick.
to Seven, when he's just like, you can't do that. Like, yeah, I know they're your friends. And the audience is like, no, go save them. Go,
Yeah.
there's Picard and
Not
Riker.
wrong.
And he's like, there's 500 something people on this ship.
He's a
What-
good captain.
Yeah.
And
But
I
if you-
love the fact that the first way, I mean, look, we, writers and I'm obviously executives talk a lot about like how we introduce a character is so key. And he gets one of the best character introductions in the history of Star Trek. He's just eating. And then
He's
he
already
just
eating. I got
he
started without you.
takes the piss out of everybody. It's like, no, screw you guys. I work for a living. And here you
What's
guys
great
are.
is they give the
And,
whole speech,
no.
and they're so cocky, and this kind of plan. Of course, this plan is going to work. And it's like, oh, we just want you to change this for the same amount of time, and won't you look great for having done this and taken the Grand Admiral? And of course, and I got to say, in 90s Star Trek, the answer would be, of course, Admiral
Of
Picard,
course.
right?
Except he wins
And-
the scene.
And he goes, no.
No.
And it's so funny because I remember watching, and I said to Terry, I said, oh my God, I love this character so much. And it's so great. And I feel bad because I know you're going to get so much heat from the kids. They're like, he's a bully. He's a jerk. Starfleet wouldn't have somebody like this. And he's mean. He's mean. And I really thought he was going to get so much more pushback from the kids, right? For who just who like
Who are the kids. I'm sorry. You've just
from the audience when they saw it.
Oh, okay.
I thought the young people that bitch
young
about this crap, and I was so gratified to see. You saw a little of that in the first episode, like this guy's horrible and he's been mean to our people. He kicked the dog, right? And then everyone fell in love with him. So by now it's like there's virtually no one who does, and that's a testament to Todd that he made him so likable, even when he's being a jerk to the characters that we love.
The thing that was, I think, I mean, the moment that I fell in love with him, other than the Robert Shaw speech, was when he and Seven first have to work together. When she comes to him and she says, "Okay, help me figure out this changeling shit," and the way they do it, and then when they work together to catch the changeling, and you realize, wow, he's smart.
Yep.
He is really he's great at his job.
Yeah.
He's great at the job that he came from, and he's really smart. And like whatever his and this to me is the best version of the Roddenberry. So he is in constant fucking conflict with Seven. But when the job has to be done, the job gets done. They can put it all aside and they can be on the same team and they can execute. And
I just find it joyful to find competent people in the show.
Wow. Thank you. Because we've always, one thing, and we talk about this in 50-Year Mission, I've talked about this a lot. Star Trek has always been a meritocracy. Leonard used to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
What he thought people really responded to in Star Trek. We all have theories, family, hope for the future. Leonard always used to say Star Trek's a meritocracy, and people love that. They see when competence is rewarded.
Yep.
And meritocracy has become a word that's kind of a little out of fashion these days.
Yeah.
And it was, and especially in some of the other Star Trek shows where everyone is equal. They can say everyone, the yeoman or the ensign can tell the captain what to do,
right?
And that there's no sense of a hierarchy. Like the captain is in command, and these people are there to do what the captain said. It's so refreshing to see a character of competence who's in charge. And it still earns the respect of the people, still treat people well. He does actually treat his bridge crew really respectfully and well, but he asks for their opinion, but they're also not joking and undermining him with little snarky comments and everything else.
No, look, I mean, but you're right. I mean, it's really kind of throwback Trek, but it works. And it was a really good point. I hadn't even thought about it, that the way that he actually does treat his crew very well. He gets really into it with Seven, but for reasons that we begin to understand. And oh, by the way, you know what? It was like he was actually maybe too nice to her in that first episode.
Well, how would you feel if your writer's assistant went around you to her old boss, right? And did something for them and screwed you
over. Fired.
Right? It's the same thing. So, he thought he could trust her. Number two, she should be loyal to him. But instead, she goes and does something for her old boss and it undermines him. He can't trust her anymore. You totally understand where he's coming from.
Yeah. It's just really well executed because it's as you're saying, that the audience is rooting for our characters to do what they need to do, to get to where they need to go to. We're rooting for Seven to help them because loyalty, and he could have simply been just a stock obstacle or antagonist in the way that Terry executed him, and he wasn't. And that extra 10% fit, whatever it is everything, because it makes the whole world feel real, and your own sense of your loyalties, your what you want to happen complicates it because they're wrong. I mean, and they do get completely screwed, and people die, and it's all of those things that he accuses them of in the dinner.
And he's not a wimp, by the way. Not only does he, first of all, defeat Riker and Picard, when they have their first encounter with the Shrike, he's not the guy saying, now we have to get the hell out of here. Right. He's like, no, we're engaged now. So I'm going to find out what it is we're up against. And I'm like, you know what? You go, girl. I mean, that is exactly what a starship captain should
But
say.
Also, how great is it when Jack is going to beam over to the Shrike and give himself up? And he says, great, fantastic, let him go, right? Yeah. And then Picard says, I can. He says, why not? He goes, because he's my son. And the way Todd plays it, oh, damn it, okay. Right. And he just changes on a dime. Yep. We can't let this guy go. We're going to war. It is what it is, and it's just such a great turn. And look, for an eon, we did this great Star Trek character list. And then this show came on. And all of a sudden, completely torpedoed this whole stupid list. Yeah, because
don't do it again. It was too late. It was just,
no, we're not going to do it again. But obviously, Riker would be much higher. 7 of 9 would be much higher. We just talked about, obviously, Captain Shaw would 100% be on it. Let's talk about some of the other new characters. I love Sydney LaForge.
Totally love Sydney LaForge.
Yeah.
And
She
that
is
actress
great.
is so great. She's so charismatic, and you believe her as an officer, but as a young officer.
Right.
Who just wants, she has things to prove, but not like in an obnoxious way.
Well, and she's an expert in what she does and what she knows. So she's an expert in piloting, and she's an expert in engineering because her dad was a brilliant engineer. She's not offering advice or talking about things that are outside of her purview. Right. And she's just so charming and a great character. And what a great backstory, too, that her dad expected her to be an engineer, but she wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah.
I mean,
Just
all
like
that
Dad was
stuff.
originally.
Crash LaForge.
Crash LaForge. I mean, it's so much fun. It's like, I'd love to see more of that character. And then go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna you're leading discussion. You please.
Well, I was going to say, and what about Ed Spielers, who
Yeah.
talk about star making performance?
Also,
Jack
a
is a
role
great
that
character.
could not be more thankless on the surface of what it could be and how it could be played, and how, because not just, this is what I was gonna ask you guys about your opinion, because it's like it's the Private Ryan problem. It's like I asked Matt about this once, where it was just like, okay, you're Matt Damon, you're gonna go take that role in the worst role in the Steven Spielberg movie, the guy they gotta go save. And it's like, well, because it's Steven Spielberg, and you're gonna be in that part, and you're literally like and so I thought that's what was so interesting about this, because yes, you're technically you find out pretty quickly that he's Patrick's son, that he's Picard's son, but he's very, very quickly, and for most of the story, the problem, in a way that it's like he everyone's looking for him.
Right.
And he can't do anything about it. He can't, he can do, I wanted to see what you guys thought about his story and the mystery of how that unfolds, about why he's different. But as a character who's just has stuff happen to him, I find out I'm this, I find out I'm the cause of these deaths. I'm the one who just I try to give myself up. I can't. It's thankless. Like, it's a hard part in a lot of ways, because
Totally agree.
you just gotta be there and have everybody be mad at you.
And there's no self-pity.
Right.
There's also no self-importance.
You have to be the the non-petulant son who's like, I don't want to talk to dad, and I don't like him because I think he's a dick, and then eventually I'm gonna
I more believe that Jack Crusher is Jean-Luc Picard's son than I ever believed that David Marcus was.
Oh, well, totally. Because
Yeah.
Merritt Patrick had the hardest job in the world, being the son of the most charismatic man in the universe. Now, Ed has the second hardest job, being the son of one of the second most charismatic man in the universe.
Yeah.
And he is sensational. And I love the Matt Damon analogy. It's funny because he ends up being Jason Bourne, being another Matt Damon character.
But he also manages
I'm
to
not
be
knocking Matt at all. I just mean that.
No.
Choice.
but
What a
so
hard
is-
role that was in Private
Choose
Ryan.
to play the one that everybody has to save.
Well,
No,
you're
but-
Mr. Wu or Harry Lime, the one everyone's talking about. And then at the end, it's like, and
he
it's
has
like
his own story. He is forging his own identity in this, and we watch him do things that on some level, maybe it's self-interest, but no, actually it's pretty heroic. And he's resourceful. He comes up with some pretty good plans, and he's brave. He's all the things that you would want him to be. I mean, he's the guy who kind of comes up with the bounty plan, and it's pretty perfect. But he's
also gotta
humane.
find
Like,
out
I
that-
love the whole, you do those drive-by bits of observational poetry. Like, it's just
Well, I compare that to Tom Hardy in Nemesis. Tom Hardy, I think we all agree, is a phenomenal actor with charisma to spare, and yet it's not a great performance, and I certainly don't buy him as a.
I was just, like I said, just watching it. I was like, and now I haven't seen since obviously all watching the show, and I'm like, wow, this was a bad idea. Like, it does not work in Nemesis. Like, it is so. It's the part it does start to fall. The movie falls off the cliff at that point.
And yet Ed, as his son, works so well. And I see some of the criticism has been, it's another son of a captain that they didn't know about. But he, Yeah, but Kirk knew about his son.
Kirk knew about his son.
Picard didn't, and it's not necessarily just about the son. It's about how the son illuminates characters we thought we knew: Beverly, Picard,
Riker.
Again,
Riker.
the stuff. If you think about just every episode with what Ed had to play of a guy who's never in control.
Mhm.
Like, that's really hard. It's like he's finding out that, again, he doesn't know why they're looking for him. Okay, I'm different. Then this stuff starts happening to him and you can't explain it when it's happening. And then he finds out, oh, it's aromatic syndrome. I'm going to die because the thing you get, it's like constant stream of just like, I'm being pushed back and everyone else is moving the story this way and trying to protect me. And I just think it's actually very well rendered on the page, but also just how he does it with real frustration and like weird kind of. I was really impressed because again, you could imagine more than any other element of this story. I think that character and that story element just not being good enough, because you're just, okay, it's the thing, the MacGuffin, it's the trying to get him, and he's got the thing, and you can talk about his function in the story because he is the reason for it all being, in a sense, and you have to parse it out in a procedural way, but that's not easy to play. Like, if you didn't have a character in it, it could have very easily just been like, fine.
You know who else I loved? Amanda Plummer. Oh my God. Because we've seen these Who's Our Con. We've talked about this a million times on the show. And she in a way, it's like, who's our con? It's it's Amanda Plummer, but we've never seen a performance like this. I think Eric Bana tried to do it in 2009, tried and died. Whereas, Amanda is just so quirky and interesting as an actress in general. And what she does here is just so much fun.
This is the one thing I gotta split with you on this. I did not like that character at all.
Wow, bold words.
I found her extremely annoying.
You found her? Hey,
that's good.
Maybe he'll changeling his opinion.
Very, very clever, Mr. Asbell. I found the character sort of too comic booky and too sort of on the nose. And I didn't enjoy any scenes that she was in. And maybe that's just me, but that's the sort of the one thing that I didn't enjoy in this season. I don't know how it could have been done differently, and I have no suggestion. But it just hit me. It hit me wrong for some reason.
You didn't like the Jello pudding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially the Jello pudding on her hand that turned into a floating
guys
head.
but that's interesting. Obviously nothing's ever perfect. The show isn't perfect. Darren mentioned something he didn't like about it. Tell me, Ashley, what did you bump on? What didn't you like about the show?
Obviously, for everything that I've said, clearly I hated every minute of it. But no, there were little things that occasionally would sort of like that would pull me out of it as an intellectual exercise, and it's the dumbest stuff in the world, and it has really nothing to do with the characters or with how the story moved forward. But things like when we do the first flashback and it's 2 weeks earlier, but the way that everybody is behaving, it doesn't feel like it was 2 weeks ago.
Right.
And then when Beverly kind of gives the description of when everything started happening, it was like it was months ago. But she talked about, well, it's this time that we saw the Fenris Rangers, which sort of sounds like what we saw in the 2 weeks ago flashback. So there were little things that didn't track. And then there were other things that it was like, sometimes it was, we're sticking with what happened in season 1 and season 2 of this Fakakta show, but because we kind of have
good use of the word Fakakta.
Thank you. I'm learning at the feet of the master.
Apparently someone on Facebook proposed a Inglorious Treksperts drinking game. And they said every time Mark uses a Yiddish word, you should take a drink.
Oy vey. But there were things that like that made me get into spoiler territory, but I just kind of wondered about how the square got circled in a couple of ways. I mean, look, it's for me, my test is, am I having an emotional reaction to what I'm seeing? And is the show that I'm watching able to pull me in and do that for me, even if I have like this question and that question? And it always passed that test. Because, you know, look, this is just my personal philosophy as a writer, which is that nobody ever remembers the fucking plot.
Yep.
Nobody. You know, it's my Star Wars test, right? Like, you pass out like a piece of paper to 100 people in a room who've all seen Star Wars. You ask them to tell you exactly what happened. You will get 100 different answers, and they'll all be wrong.
But even more so for television.
Yeah,
it's all about the
100%.
characters. It's not about the plot.
It's about the moment.
Plot is a MacGuffin.
That's right. So it's like, on some level, it's like, well, who cares? Okay, so somebody put 2 weeks ago Cryon on there. All right, well, I don't care.
Well, that's why some of the criticisms to me are completely absurd.
Yeah.
You know, but there's these OCD kind of like focus on some of these things. I don't care about the Starship porn. I don't care about the a lot of nonsense, because all that matters to me are the character moments of the writing, and those are first rate. If I was going to offer criticism, and again, this is nothing that could have been fixed, I think it would have worked better as 13 episodes than 10.
Yes,
I feel it's a little rushed at the end.
First of all, I love the Starship stuff. I mean, I'm so glad how much work that went into the both the historical ships and getting to kind of have their place in the story. But I had a moment where I was like, so we had so many different of the shows now, the new shows that have spanned different eras, Discovery being in its era now in 32nd century or whatever, but sort of how the next gen evolution of those lines. And I was bumped at the beginning. I was like, oh wow, so they really went and took the kind of refit TOS movie shapes and kind of melded that aesthetic with the next generation and beyond styling. But I sort of dig it, like, and I kind of was like, oh, okay, this feels like a good both reclamation of a thing that I love, because
It feels like Star Trek.
It feels like Star Trek. And I guess that's what I mean, is that the ships because Star Trek, I mean, we've talked about this, the ships were always a huge part for me.
Yeah. Well, and the Titan's a nice looking ship.
But just how crazy the ships in certainly the far future just become so organic looking, which you could say, I mean, it's a testament to how brilliant the what do they call the fat one, how brilliant the D Galaxy class is, because it sort of was like kind of wild at the time that they did.
It was
Yeah,
widely
I saw that
despised.
shit.
Widely despised.
I want to talk about the D, but before we do that, I just want to say my only other criticism, and I think there's some truth to this, which people have expressed, is the color timing. And again, this is not anyone. Unfortunately, this is the aesthetic of the new Star Trek, which takes its cues from the movies. The fact that it is so dark.
Yeah.
And it's so I'm not saying go back with that 90s kind of bright key lighting, but it's too dark. It doesn't need to be that dark.
Agreed. But it does give a spectacular contrast to in episode 9, where we go aboard that old ship,
awesome.
And everything is bright again. And it's like they're stepping out into the light.
Well, let's talk about that.
I want to before we do that, can I add to I don't have a criticism. It's different. It's not criticism. I think it's more what you just said about having, I don't know, again, 13 episodes, 12. I don't know how this TV shit works, but I felt like I wanted more of certain things. And when you say it felt rushed, to me it was everything about Frontier Day and the notion that, like, there was I can't remember if I don't want to say something that was in 10, if I don't want to spoil something in advance, of like what was going on with all of the ships. Oh yeah, it was in 9, right? Because they had to get the Enterprise because everything else was late. This notion, it was the very Battlestar, Ron's Battlestar idea.
Well, yeah, that all the ships are connected,
which isn't necessarily bad. I don't mean they copied it from.
They didn't, but it's very redolent of it.
but it's something that I wish that had been set up earlier with respect to there was an element about the Federation and what was going on in the world, which I know you couldn't really step away from in those early episodes, the Titan and what was going on, because
They
it was so
kind of
urgent.
did, though. They kind of did. It was a little later. It was maybe episode 6 or 7 when someone said, "Oh, well, that's why they found us, because they're all connected."
Yeah.
No, I
And
know
was
it was in there. I just didn't understand why. Like,
you wanted to be platformed a little bit more.
well, is that what they call it? I feel like I'm just a babe in the woods of television. But I guess when I was looking at it, I was like, hey, this is the Borg, guys. Like, your whole, like, does anybody think about that? That the whole idea of sort of this technology being linked in a way that I didn't understand why. Like, what was the value
advantage?
Well, I'll put my
You have to
nerd hat on for a
understand the way
second.
things work on a starship.
And not
Prefix
like
code?
my
Prefix
Star Trek
code.
nerd hat, but my nerd hat. And this was like my previous life, like working for the CNO nerd hat. And there was even back in the 90s, in the early 90s, there was a concept called network-centric warfare. And one of the big ideas of it was this, that, and to a certain extent, it was implemented. Okay, so every single ship in the fleet would be connected by all of the computer communication systems, all the sensor systems. They would share a common picture of everything. And in the network-centric warfare version of it, the ideal response to any threat would be, it might be one guy pushing a button, but what responds is from the optimal platform, right? So you could be standing like on the USS Abraham Lincoln, push a button, and the thing that happens off the deck of like some Arleigh Burke. And what made everybody a little bit wiki-wacky about that was captains wanting to be responsible for the things that happen on board their ships. So it was an old idea. I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying that. It like goes back to the 90s.
Sorry,
so to me, it was like, well, of course, why aren't they doing that? But then it was like, you're right. It's like,
I just
is anybody going?
it just
does
felt
this
like
feel a little
such a
Borgy
big
to you?
element of the climax that and especially when you sort of view that against the backdrop of a conspiracy to infiltrate Starfleet, which I buy. I mean, that was clear. I don't mean anything, and it wasn't anything, by the way, that wasn't clear. I actually just wanted more, about that, or sort of even a little bit of Starfleet. I mean, and you saw obviously Tuvok, but it wasn't Tuvok, and kind of you never. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's great.
No, look, and I think these are all quibbles because obviously this is a huge success for us. I completely agree with that. I felt that was kind of introduced late, and I think there's something really interesting going on right now with AI, where everybody's talking about, is AI going to destroy humanity? And so I think Star Trek at its best, sort of deals with these things. So like networking the fleet, it's like an M5 question. It's like, I think there's more to explore there, which probably goes to my point about, I could have really benefited from 13 episodes, because it's something that's like sort of set up as the catalyst for how the Borg are able to take over, but we don't really explore it in any kind of meaningful way. Anyway, it is what it is. But let's talk about a moment.
Destroy humanity. It's just going to destroy what's left of good taste.
So let's talk about, obviously, one of the great moments. Darren, when you were working on the show, you were there when they built it. You spent some time on the set of the D.
Actually, it was after I worked on it. They were nice
okay.
enough. They were nice enough to let me come back and visit when they had the new setup, and it was great. It was it was amazing. The new set of the Bridge of the D is built so much better than the original one was. It's just it's just so much better, and it looks exactly the same. And because I was on the bridge of the D during Generations, and it's just so much better, and it feels so right. And seeing it in the show though was such a wonderful callback. Seeing everyone walk on the bridge and the lights coming on was just a rebirth.
And Majel's voice.
Yeah, it was so heartwarming and emotional for those people who went through that journey from 36 years ago, and it's such a great gift to be able to, for a few moments go back home again and experience the things you experienced back then.
Hello, chair.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, look, obviously watching the original Star Trek movies, Star Trek the Motion Picture, when it's Star Trek 2, these great moments. There's things in Star Trek 6, obviously, that really get you because of the attachment that we have to those characters in that show.
Yeah.
I feel like the reveal of the D and them stepping back, it's we've come home, and Star Trek 3. But it's a really special moment. The fact that they recreated it in a way, it has that feeling that Jimmy Doohan and Relics on the original bridge had, and it is just, it's spectacular. They have some fun with it. It is germane to the story. The fact that it's not on the network, it is really, really great. And having been on that set many times, the original back during the days of the Next Generation, it was just great. And I'll never forgive myself because I never sat in the captain's chair, because they told me no one except Patrick is supposed to sit in the captain's chair.
And then you saw a grip in it. And
no, I know so many people who sat in that fucking captain's chair, and I never did it, and it always pissed me off. But anyway, it was amazing.
Here's what I find interesting about the D reveal, and I think Darren kind of you got to it when you were talking about how the lighting changed. I mean, look, Picard is not grimdark. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not a show that's like, okay, we're all. I mean, look, it's Deep Space Nine dark when it's dark. It's not like, it's not self-indulgent in that way. Mm-hmm. But look, like any good movie, by that point in the movie, we feel like all hope is lost. We feel like we're screwed and we've got nothing.
Yeah.
And when they walk aboard that bridge and those lights come on and she starts moving out of space dock, out of the Fleet Museum, it's perfectly timed. Again, it's emotional ammunition. We swell with hope, which is what that starship was all about. You know what I mean? It's exactly the right moment because it provides us with exactly the right response. Suddenly we're going, okay, now we've got a chance because this ship, these people, like they represent what's possible.
And it's also a great payoff to how, what you guys said earlier, of how they chose to introduce the various characters in sequence and dramatize most of their differences. Certainly Beverly and Picard, certainly Riker and Picard for that whole section on the Titan, Geordi's resistance to wanting to do it, Data's various personalities, all of that, so that when they do finally get there together, they play that moment of wherever you go, we go. And it is a payoff. It is not a foregone conclusion at the beginning of the show, like, hey, we're back together because this situation is so dire. The situation was dire before, but when they finally get there and they can take their places, and it's the joke of the field, I'll accept the field demotion and all of that. It's not that we haven't. Okay, the show just got. That's maybe another way of saying it is, oh, we finally got the thing we wanted, and it just got good when they all got back on the ship, because that's what we want to see. We liked it all the way through, and then they got on, and you realize, like,
it was earned.
Yeah, they got the band back together in episode 9.
Yes,
which is great.
Get to deal with the thing and to actually deal with their issues. That's what I'm saying. When Riker says, "Wherever you go, we go," is a capper on that story and all the things that they've just gone through, which is the point that you can't actually go home again. And
that's Star Trek. That is Star Trek. That's family.
When you got to do the job and you're back on the thing, and that Geordi had this for them, and that it was sitting there, that it's not like, again, a last minute thing, that he had been restoring it for 20 years.
But also, hiding in plain sight. There's a reason that the Enterprises were number 1 on our character list.
Mhm.
because the Enterprise is a character, and
And
it's
they
the
finally
final
reunited.
character to
Mhm.
be reunited with everyone
Yep.
else.
They got the whole family there and Rafi.
Yeah.
What
And look,
And Rafi, but Rafi is not on the D.
I
what do you
think
that's-
think Worf
Isn't she?
did to the E? I was a lot of speculation.
that's a great
about that.
throwaway line, and I hope that we'll find out
Well,
someday.
To me, that's like, we don't talk about that.
I love
Leave it
that.
at that. You know, when they talk
I
about
love
when
that
the
you didn't
Klingons, we don't
Klingons
talk about that.
deal with it. I love that it was like it just wasn't there.
I
And-
didn't hate Rafi this season.
Oh,
I didn't.
I
either.
did. Oh, I did.
didn't.
And my
Yeah.
wife did. She's like, every time one of those scenes came on, particularly in the first couple episodes before Worf shows up, it's like, what is with this
I think
person?
pairing
she's
her up
from the first 2 seasons.
with Worf is great.
Well, that helped. That
Yeah.
helped.
And
Once she was with
I
Worf, it
didn't
was
hate her.
different.
I hated her in the previous seasons.
We haven't said, by the way, just on that note, how fucking awesome Michael Dorn is in the show.
Oh, Michael
great.
is so
I
great.
mean,
great.
He's so great.
He hasn't lost a step.
No, he's better.
better.
And he's brought new layers to it that are
So
fascinating.
much
to
more
watch.
confident. I would even not that he was ever not, but I just mean the sort of what he was playing about the the alien in the room.
What a delight.
Yep.
So funny but charming, but awesome and fierce. Everything
Not out of character.
and not
Yeah.
out of character.
No, completely in
He
character.
likes some chamomile tea. I mean, it was like great.
But even
That
he's
was it,
grown.
is that he's
That's like,
trying
yeah,
to be-
he's grown. He's changed. You know,
He's
the whole
working on
idea of
himself.
embracing pacifism, but not. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's terrific. And
like,
even
when
the
they go to
reveal.
bridge, that scene where he's just like, I thought the weapons on the E were much better. He's perfect. Like it's still that, there's still enough of a nod to each of them of who they are. That's what I mean. Data saying hello chair is not technically it's like it's a line that's sort of recalls who he was.
Yeah.
Well, I think the
When-
show really benefits from the camaraderie the actors have. You
Yeah.
know, whereas we all know that the original crew, they didn't really love each other that much, right? With Next Generation, we know, despite like any family, they don't always get along, but they love each other. They've known each other for 30 years, and it comes across on screen. It's funny because we've talked on the show a lot about how, if it had been up to us, we would never brought Spock back. And for a while,
You guys are
I
insane.
kind of bumped on Data being back. It's like I felt like he wanted to go. He wanted to go in Nemesis. He wanted to be killed off. Well, if it's death, let it be death, right? Now, I did think that, and we've seen this in every bottle show. Oh, the mindscape, where 2 characters are in the mind because it's cheap and easy to do. But I have to say, they got me. Like, it was earned. That was great. The battle between Laura and Data was really well done, and the way that Data wins. So it's like, okay, this is almost worth bringing Brent back again, because I think I would have enjoyed having Brent back if they hadn't put him in every show before this for no reason, where
Right,
it was completely unearned. Like here, at least, obviously we got to figure out a way that he can be old and he doesn't have to wear the yellow makeup, and that we can make it easy for Brent. And we
doesn't
can
that
just
prove the
Too many
thesis
symbols.
about fan service versus things having a reason for being there. Like when he showed up before, it was he's kind of there, and now it's now we know why he's here, and it means something.
And I think also what having Brent there really helped Geordie's character, like the friendship. They really did something interesting with that friendship. When Forge is pleading with Data to come overcome Lore, because he loves him and he cares about him. I think that's a really special scene, and it really helps inform Geordie, because that's another character that they really did right by, because Geordie was another thankless role throughout most of the TV series and the movies. And what they do with him here is wonderful. The fact that he's like, I'm not going to help you, Picard, and you're like, what? Wait, what? Excuse me.
I think he had plenty of excellent highlights in the show. I don't think the movies did him any justice, or at least enough.
You mean when he turned into a
being
lizard
able to
man?
remove the visor and but it's like, he was great.
He was great. And look, LeVar is such a terrific actor. And I just think it's great. And putting his real daughter in it as one of his daughters.
Yeah.
And she's fun and she's good. And just like it's a family affair, and you sense it. It's a family affair.
Wow.
And
Oh my
it's
God,
really
there's a deep
really
cut.
really good stuff. So okay, so obviously a lot of love for this show, these 10 episodes, this mini series we'll call it, because we're not going to say it's a lot of love for Star Trek Picard. It's a lot of love for Star Trek Picard season 3, the next generation miniseries we'll call it. Did it stick the landing? I'd like to know what you guys think. Episode 10, Steve ASBELL.
For sure. In almost every way. In fact, I think it not only once you reveal what the baddie is and the suggestion of the specific who of the queen and of the fact that was the underlying threat was actually personal to Picard,
Mm-hmm.
and that it became about, again, it's a convoluted thing when you look back at it and say, okay, they needed the body because the thing had gone through the thing, and you know, it's a little, it's, again, it's not, I don't think of it as a negative. I just mean like there was a lot of mileage to deal with in terms of the misdirect of Amanda Plummer's character of Vadic, and who they were.
Well, and how surprising was that in episode 8 that she gets blown out of an airlock, and you're like,
Fucking
wait,
solid.
she's not the villain? She's not the big
I'm
bad?
saying, all that was, I'm saying it was to get there. You find, okay, that's what's behind the door, and it's a thing. But that, it was her. When he says what she's capable of, you know, because he's like, all of a sudden, it goes from being the Borg as Star Trek villain, you know, extraordinaire, to First Contact. And
well, it's funny. I'll be the contrarian. Like, I actually kind of said, oh, it's the Borg again. I was kind of a little disappointed, but it's executed so well that I didn't mind, because I love that scene where Troy goes running to Patrick, and it's like, he's, you know, this is what's going on. Holy shit. And that it's personal to Picard. I just feel like we've told that story a couple of times, and every time we deal with the trauma of the Borg, I feel like it diminishes family a little bit more. That wonderful episode that I love so much.
Well, that damage had been done, I would argue, by previous. Yes, I mean,
by the time we got to Descent, that damage had been done.
Well, no, I just mean post the TNG, but I think the idea that it for me anyway, because I agree. I mean, there's certainly kind of the danger of a buildup like that, only to reveal that it's a villain or a characters that had been in the season or in the series in Picard in a different context, but that it finally played into the themes that they were talking about in terms of family, in terms of belonging, in terms of never having children, the idea of, which is the underlying thing for Jack, which was the connections and the vines. I didn't quite get that memory stuff with the,
well, you're all connected, and
I got it. I just when the petals and some of the visualization of it, I didn't drop in terms of getting to the door, because I feel like that is also imagery that has been used in some of the other series recently, like the doors and the, when it gets too hallucinatory.
Yes,
I get a little, but the reveal that there was something actually happening, he was the transmitter, they needed him. But
it absolutely works so much better in season 3. But you're right. The fact that some of that had been done in season 2 was not helpful.
Which is really
Discovery. They'd use some, or at least what I saw of it, they had anyway, a door and whatever. What were you saying, Ash?
Oh, I'm just saying that was honestly my only real bump on it. Was like there was a part of me that was trying to square the circle with like season 2, but then I realized, fuck season 2, I don't care. Because what to me, and why I think it stuck the landing in terms of the plot stuff, was that it managed to bring it all together in a very deeply personal, emotional way. And so all of that, again, plot, it's emotional ammunition. All of that stuff pays off in a way that Picard is now, forced to contend with all the changes in his life, all of the roads not taken, his relationship with Jack. Like, he is now trying to be a good father by saying, like, here are all the things that I've learned, kid. Here's all the mistakes that I've made, and here's all the things that that I've done right. And not only that, it manages to justify, you know, and not in a plotty way, but like the existence of Seven of Nine in this story and her relationship with her Borginess. It manages to make Shaw's relationship with everybody precisely perfect. And it adds a new layer to his speech about the USS Constance and what happened aboard her and what happened to him. And even like little throwaway lines, like, I'm not talking about that weird shit on the Stargazer. I'm talking about the real Borg. They're out there someplace, which I thought was like a great little moment. I was kind of happy to sort of see it. So there was all of that stuff that came together. But I have to tell you, like, what worked best for me was that it was so propulsive and emotional. And then, like, when it came to an end, to realize that we had basically been watching this, hopefully, a backdoor pilot for a show.
Wow.
I mean,
let me, before you get to that, let me just say,
Yeah.
what I love what you said about the Borg and why I think it ultimately works so well is the Borg were really warmed over cyberpunk from the 80s. And what Terry did, and his writing room did, was he turned it into something that was very 21st century, because it became a biological genetic thing and not just a cyberpunk thing. So I think the way that the Borg were sort of implanted in everybody, and that it became kind of a genetic, rewriting of the DNA, was so interesting, because I think it took it out of the 90s and it made it very much of the moment. So it felt fresh and new. And I kind of loved, given their budget, what they did with Alice, obviously having another actress play her is in this sort of weird, messed up form, and having Alice do the voice. I mean, that was smart.
But I thought that the other new thing about it that I thought was interesting was that they were a decrepit, meaning that she had eaten them all, that they were on their last
It was like a Grimm's fairy tale.
That it was not the Borg resurgent, it was the Borg angry and she, meaning through her, had been, it's a tomb, I think somebody Worf says. And you realize, like, the desperate gambit of this plan was not here's another, here's our next thing. It's like, this is it, this is the end game, because there's no, and this, and maybe she didn't say it, but I felt that she had survived kind of on this hatred of PICARD, and the sort of pressure of taking Jack as the means to reconstitute them, because
PICARD was her white whale,
and it's all dead. The sort of zombie dead. I mean, there are a few of them, I guess, that are kind of go after them, but that it was not that they'd been waiting in there, and that it was pretty dark, like that's what she was doing,
super creepy,
and it wasn't just the same old shit
there.
But I would have loved to have seen in that final scene, because it seems like space dock is the one thing that stands between us, and which is funny, because obviously Terry has a huge space dock fetish. Yeah, I know.
I love space dock.
I would have loved to have then seen, like, the Klingons and the Romulans show up to, like, that, to help, like, save the Federation. I think that would have been this message of hope and people working together, and it would have just been epic.
If you had 13 episodes, you could have dramatized some of that, what else was happening. If somebody thought, for example, okay, Klingon or Romulan heard the Federation's being infiltrated, let's make a move. Some other thing that was happening as the Federation was impaired in some way, or threat, you just would have had to track it. You would have had to understand kind of what was going on.
I love that scene in Independence Day, where you got the Israelis and the Arabs are all working together to stop the aliens, and it's just like it is such a sense of hope, and it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and all this kind of stuff. And I would have loved to have seen, because this is such a love letter to Star Trek, some of these other great races and part of the mythology that we sort of didn't see, which brings us to this last 15 minutes, which if this is truly the end, which it might be, of not only this legacy of Star Trek, but this good Star Trek, it might be the end of what they call now vintage Star Trek or legacy Star, whatever
Star Trek people like.
If it's the end of the Star Trek people like, I could not imagine a more powerful 15 minutes
Oh my god.
than these last 15 minutes, which are heartbreaking and beautiful, and they tee up what could be an amazing show. And
One
as
of
if
the
it can't even get
greatest
better,
shots in Star Trek show history or movie history is that shot of the shit. Like you're like, wait,
Yep.
it's there, beaming that it had to get that close to them to beam them up from given where they were, and just like just I was like, fuck, that's
but
amazing.
I'm talking about the
I love
emotional,
that. No, but
the
it was- but I
emotional
mean,
ending.
You're talking about, like, you're talking about the Return of the King endings.
I'm talking about the Return of the King, and you know, I'm like
Yes.
Star Trek 4. I hate all the multiple. In this, I loved every
Me too.
second of it, and that Kevin Feige post-credit sequence is brilliant.
It totally
mean,
is. But
I
my
mean,
favorite
talk about
part-
leaving us hungry for you. I want more. I have to have more, right? You gotta keep going. There has to be another show.
What just tickles me pink about the whole thing. What had me the most excited is that I love that 7 of 9 is now the captain of the
Okay.
Enterprise.
Yes.
And
Yes.
every time I see like the Titan now, like on the rewatch, or when people are like they're doing their Star Trek Titan
Yeah.
like main title sequence, I'm like, you people have no idea.
Don't know what's coming in a couple
You're
days.
looking at the Enterprise. You're
Yeah.
looking at the Enterprise G.
And
it's
let's
just-
face it, you
Boy.
said it before. The real star of Star Trek is not
It's the
Kirk,
Enter-
it's not Picard, it's the Enterprise.
the
And they've forgotten that for so long, right?
Yep.
And now it's like Terry gets it, and his team, and they're like, here's the Enterprise, here's characters you love, going boldly where
Here's
no one has
even a
gone
bridge
before.
crew that you
It's
don't
that
necessarily
simple.
know all of their names, but you know them in a friendly way. They all got moments.
They
and
all
I
got
found myself
moments.
feeling like I would kind of love to see, like I did dig. I know that you were saying you didn't love Rafi, and but I did like the idea that, like, what a motley crew of the three of them sitting on those chairs. What she says, the pirate, the thief, and
And her lover.
The
Oh, wait, no, that's
people
Peter
who
Greenaway.
fry the cock. It's a
and the
delicacy.
thing. But just like that, there was something so unusual about that she got the command, but that it was the same crew. I don't know. There was something different.
But how fun is it that Jack Crusher strides out and takes the chair?
Yeah,
and I mean,
great.
it's so clever and smart and playing and inverting your expectations and playing. And, look, it's really sad that Todd was killed off, and it's not necessarily like
You can bring him back.
there's always a way.
Yeah.
There's always a way. If you can bring back freaking Spock, you can bring back Todd Stashwick.
Guys, don't relitigate that.
Well, listen, I want to bring back Darren into the conversation. So I think, look, we all felt that this was a very special finale, and that they totally accomplished what they set out to do, didn't we?
Yes.
Yes.
And that last 15 minutes is so much heart in it. Oh my God, is so much
I've
heart
had
in it.
so much fun just watching the social reactions, not just of fans and people that are casual fans, but the fun of Terry and Bill Blass and the various writers that we've all gotten to meet a little bit online. They're loving it, and they're just having so much fun interacting with
And they
fans
deserve it.
where people are like, it's exciting, and they're talking amongst each other, and it's like Twitter is good for a minute. And it's,
But you know what's going to happen? People are going to be like, but Q is dead. He died in the second season. Like, fuck off.
Come on, he's a
Who
kid.
cares? Forget second season.
Yeah.
I thought he had a really perfect explanation for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the line, he was just like,
Yeah.
it was
And the
perfect. You're
scene
like,
is so good that you. Yeah.
And it's funny because Delancey was saying he was so pissed off that he wasn't invited to premiere. He's like, I'm in it. But nobody picked up on that.
yeah,
It was great that nobody picked up on, because he was like, I can't believe they didn't invite me to the premiere because I'm in it. But obviously they didn't invite him. They didn't want anybody to know about this.
I never heard
and he-
that. Did he say that publicly?
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody picked.
Nobody picked up on. And I
wow.
don't, and they didn't get the, 10 out to anyone. So people
Yeah.
didn't know. Anyway, so let's bring Darren back into conversation and continue and just wrap things up. What a gift this was, wasn't it? The show to all of us who love Star Trek so very much.
I like Star Trek.
I really do.
And
Me too.
it's sort of refreshing to watch a show that reminds me that I like Star Trek.
You know what was refreshing for me, Darren? I watched it more than once.
Yeah.
There's some recent Star Treks, I'm not going to say which, I couldn't even get through a whole episode in one viewing.
I mean,
I
you
watched
think
this
that-
multiple times.
Well, I mean, we want to talk about stuff that we enjoy, and that's why we're talking about this.
That we love.
Yeah,
Isn't it
it's
amazing to
it's
fall in love again?
It's
it's
a
so
far
refreshing.
better thing that I do.
And look,
now.
it's not perfect, and that's fine, but it's good, and it's enjoyable, and it reminds us, where we've been, and it's just
Well,
it's so nice to see the results of people who enjoy it as much as we do.
yeah. And that they to make it with such care, and we've all gotten to talk to Terry about it, and like I said, sort of getting a window into his collaborators and how much they all put into it, and how it's extraordinary, because it shows that it can be navigated, this modern perilous world of genre TV and movie making, where you're playing with things that we should all just be able to love, but doesn't feel like that's the conversation anymore.
And I hope it's not ephemeral, because remember when Better Call Saul was wrapping up? I mean, everyone was talking about it, and it was amazing. It was amazing, and everyone was talking about it. Cut to a month later, no one's talking about it, right? I mean, Succession right now, everybody's talking about, and deservedly
Isn't
so.
that the nature of certain? I mean, you're talking about Star Trek. I think there's a difference between popular shows. There's The Sopranos, which people are still talking about. And there's Star Trek, which is, I think that's the real point, which I think you guys make on this show all the time, which is, I mean, it's profound. I mean, you talk about all these other franchises, certainly even the ones that we grew up with. Star Trek is 50 years. I mean, it's crazy.
Almost 60.
Almost 60.
It's closer to 60 than it is to 50 now.
And that's what we're really saying here, is that that the ability to reinvigorate in a way is still there, meaning that all the different phases, different seasons of but what has gone through as many permutations as Star Trek, and yet still to be talking about it not just in the past tense, but to say that there's still hope.
And I think it's very rare. I mean, you had Ira Bear come and hit Deep Space Nine out of the park, and you could argue that Manny Koto did that with the fourth season of Enterprise to a certain extent, but it's been a long time since somebody came and really did something new and exciting and galvanizing with Star Trek. And Terry's done that.
And we saw it at conventions, and maybe it's just the Vegas thing, but when we were in Vegas last year, I remember walking around and feeling like, we were at a wake.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not even a good wake. Like somebody forgot to stock up the bar. And when we were in Richmond a couple of weeks ago, there was such tremendous enthusiasm and excitement. Like just the vibe was so different.
Yep.
So different.
Enthusiasms. So anyway, well, I got to tell you, it's such a thrill, not only to have this unanimity, because there've been times, even with the great Star Treks, we came on and, you and Darren squared off over Star Trek 6. And I certainly, we've had our differences about different things, but to share this excitement for the first time in a very long time about Star Trek and what's going on in the present and what potentially could happen in the future is very exciting, because we just care so deeply about this franchise. We love this franchise so much. We've been doing 5 years of these Fakakta podcasts talking about how great Star Trek is, and I still don't quite get it. I still don't quite get the obsession. People ask me, they say, "Why are you so obsessed and so into Star Trek?" I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't know. I've written all these books and these comics, and
it's so renewable, and it's the spirit of it is so forward thinking and aspirational and fun, and
but it's become more than that. Not only should it be forward thinking, but it's also letting us look back a little bit. It's letting us experience the full journey.
Wow.
That just means we're
That's what
yes.
that's what makes it
No,
exciting to me.
because Terry's paying homage to the entire history, and we didn't talk about this when we talked about the finale, but there's also a nice little nod to the original, which is a wonderful thing. And it's funny because it's always been a joke. I'm a huge, obviously, original series fan. My wife is a huge Next Generation fan.
Mm-hmm.
So we've always, and I'm a Kirk guy and she's a Picard guy. And so she was so excited when Picard premiered. And, I think she gave up on it after episode 2 or 3. I don't remember at what point she abandoned it.
Yeah.
And then I did the same thing with her that I said to everybody else. I said, you got to watch season 3. It's great.
Yep.
And for a long time, I don't know if she doesn't trust me or whatever. she finally got around to watching it. And I watched it with her. And to see her reaction, it was like how much she loved it.
Yeah.
And how it was such a thrill for me to see that. And I'm watching the episodes again and I'm enjoying them as much as the first couple of times I watched them. And I was so thrilled to see, my wife is a fan having that kind of response.
Yeah.
And she just, I think she couldn't believe it, because every time, when the new shows premiered, I'm like, do you want to watch this with me? Because obviously we're watching Succession or Barry or, most of these shows we'll watch together. She's like, nah. And like this time she's like, she would watch Star Trek Legacy. She would kill me if the Star Trek Legacy happened and I didn't wait to watch it with her at this point, which is really nice, actually.
It's all love, as the kids say. We celebrate it.
It's all about the love, just like the Ewoks say. Celebrate the love.
Jub jub.
No, they don't sing that anymore.
They don't sing that.
They don't say jub jub anymore.
They have a whole other choral.
They have another song.
Oh man, is it a rock?
Well, look, I got to tell you, this was great. We made a decision very early on that we weren't going to do weekly breakdown. A lot of other people do them. I know Rob Burnett's doing. I'm sure they're terrific because he has really great insights. And he was like the first person to champion the show
really
before anyone. And
we were like,
really was.
It's Rob.
And so, credit to him. But we didn't have the time or the interest to really do this on a weekly basis. And fortunately, Terry has been very generous with his time and sharing his thoughts with us. And I'm sure we'll come revisit this place again, not only with Terry, but some of the other people that were involved, like
especially if it's life from lifelessness.
But I'm glad that we were able to kind of sit down, just us, and talk about why we thought this was so special, because this goes back to what we said the very first week when we first saw it, and we were telling people, you got to watch this show's great, and they're saying, oh, Paramount's paying these guys off.
If only.
I just like talking about it. That's the bottom line. It's like, we can do this episode like this, not worried about having to say smart stuff, but just talk about things we like and go, oh yeah, I love that too. It's like, that's may not make for the best podcast, but it sure is fun.
And I love being able to talk about what we love. And that, and again, it's one of the reasons why, I'd been thinking for a long time about leaving, because there wasn't a lot in the Star Trek universe that I really loved that I wanted to talk about. And this has sort of changed the equation a bit. So we'll see. But it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's okay. I can see he's like, this is going to be awkward.
What?
No, Steve, we'll schedule your audition to take over the show when Mark doesn't know.
I thought, I didn't know if you got it yet, but I didn't.
Steve, we're so thrilled that you're also going to join us for the Nemesis commentary.
Well, now that I watched it again, I'm like, oh boy.
He doesn't know if he's thrilled about that.
No, I'm like, can I say anything nice? I want to be nice. It's my life.
You want to be nice? Okay, well then we should watch another movie.
Well, we did talk about The Godfather too. That's a pretty good one.
We still have to do our first contact commentary. We never got around to doing that.
We have
so
the
maybe
capability
we'll do that
to now. So just letting you know.
And John said he'd be happy to come back and do that. So
I think
we
got to get that on the books.
We'll have to see. But anyway, we're so appreciative. Look, and for the audience out there, it's okay if you disagree with us. We're not going to take it personal. I know some of you who didn't like the show. It wasn't for you. Other people who may have loved things about it that maybe we didn't. You might have loved the first 2 seasons. Yeah. I don't know. That's good for you. I'm glad you got joy, peace, and joy and contentment.
When people meaning that regardless of the other series, and when people are into them and sincerely and they love it, I think that's fantastic.
We're not telling people how to feel. We're telling people how we feel.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I mean, I think
And
great
sometimes
example
if
is,
they're wrong.
I think
Right.
Lower Decks gives people a lot of joy. And I'm glad that that's the case. I mean, I don't have a feeling about it one way or the other. It's just not something that I've watched because it's not I'm not interested in sort of like a satire of a Star Trek comedy. So it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think Mike McMahon, who does it, is a really smart guy who loves
Super
Star
smart
Trek.
guy.
It's another perspective on the franchise. So the fact that people love that show and have embraced that show, that's fantastic. Great. It's just not something that I necessarily would jump into. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I would love it if I watched it. I don't know, but it doesn't speak to me. And so clearly Picard is something, season 3 is something that spoke to all of us in a very profound way. And we're very grateful to Terry Matalas and his writing staff and his directors, because we didn't talk much about that, but Doug, Jonathan, I forget who the other director, and Terry did such a beautiful job directing the show as well. And again, with limited money, people don't realize. And it never felt small or claustrophobic in the way that Next Generation could with these bottle shows. This always felt epic. Even when you really parse it, you realize they're on the Titan the whole time.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. So any closing remarks, Mr. ASBELL?
There are always possibilities.
Ashley?
She has wonderful muscles.
Darren Doctorman.
I just hope that the future is bright for people who like this kind of stuff.
Well, a very special thanks.
Not our best closing comments, but
I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay.
A very special thanks to Mark Rivera, who continues to make us sound so great. I know this was a monster of an episode, so we appreciate it. Peter Holmstrom, thank you for your work and pulling a bunch of the clips, and also all the great work you're doing on Trekspert's Briefing Room, which continues to do some terrific episodes. So if you're not listening to it, it's an entirely other podcast, Trekspert's Briefing Room, in which Peter and Lisa have special guests from across the Star Trek universe talking about Star Trek, significant Star Trek episodes. And of course, the 4:30 movie, where Darren, Steve, and Steve Melching and Ashley Miller, Steve Melching and myself curate fantasy theme weeks every week of a classic movies. And of course, we're interested in hearing what you have to say, or some of us are, on Twitter at Inglorious Trek, Instagram at Inglorious Treksperts, and Facebook. Again, Steve, a true joy having you. It's such your passion equal even to our own, and it's always great having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And
I want to invite you. I want to invite you to come to Deck 78 and talk about The Godfather with us.
But don't come to Deck 79.
I was like, I'll meet you on 79 at some point.
You can go to 79. We'll be on 78.
It's like in the wrong Zoom. You're in the wrong
Top down.
Zoom.
It'll be fun.
Deck 79 is the in-laws, Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Right. Thank you. Anytime. I was gonna say I wish you well on your various stops, your whistle stop tour of various conventions. And it sounds tiring, but I commend you for that. Sounds like a pretty full bill. But
it is tiring, but it's given us some great content for the podcast. They've been very great hosts at GalaxyCon. They've taken very good care of us, and we found some great restaurants. And I haven't gotten hit by any scooters, so it's a win-win.
Chris Pike is just hit.
That's
you
right.
there.
No, I'm like Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Wrong
Mandalorian. Wrong meme. Exactly. So until next week, we'll be back next Thursday with an all new episode of Inglorious Treksperts. And until then, keep on trekking, ingloriously, of course. Engage.